Step into the realm of limitless imagination with Beyond the Art, where Indigenous creativity knows no bounds. Join us on a captivating journey through Indigenous art and innovation.
Together, let's delve into the depths of imagination, pushing boundaries with guests from diverse sectors of the Native American art world, each sharing their unique creative vision and inspiring journeys.
Join us for exclusive interviews, thought-provoking discussions, and uplifting stories.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Arts. I'm your host, Joe Williams, here with my co-host, Craig Beaumont Flynn. And today we have a truly inspiring guest. Cody Hammer, a Cherokee photographer and filmmaker, is joining us. Cody is a self-taught visual storyteller who uses his lens to transform the perception of Indigenous representation. Cody, we're so excited to have you with us.
Thanks, guys. Yes. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, Cody. We've been looking forward to this conversation. Your work is not only stunning, but incredibly impactful. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And don't mind all the excess noise. Like I said, I've been kind of just busy all morning and I wanted to make time for this, and I know we had it set up, and then I had a better place to go, but had something come up last second, so I'm in my car making the most of it. So I appreciate you guys.
It happens.
Hey, you're showing up and making it work, right?
Yeah.
That's what's right. So Cody, you're a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and the Muskogee Creek descendant, and you're completely self-taught as a photographer and filmmaker. Can you tell us about how you got started in visual storytelling and what drew you to this medium?
Okay, well, it all started about 2017, 2018 for me. I'm still fairly new. I feel like anything under 10 years in this is fairly new, you know what I mean? So, but more or less what happened, I worked for the Osage Nation at the time, and I worked at the Boys and Girls Club. And more or less, it kind of got shut down. Funding kind of got pushed off to the side, and I got thrown in a communications department there, having an Osage child. That I had a preference. So more or less, they didn't want to have an Osage kid who didn't have a parent working, pretty much. And so they threw me in there with no experience. I told them, I was like, I don't have anything in this. And I was there a few months, probably maybe even 6. And they kind of more or less gave me a camera, and it was like, hey, we need photos for our stories we're going to be writing. Are you interested in going take a picture of a building? And I said, sure. While I'm here, I might as well learn what I can. Because they planned on moving me out. And so I went and took a photo, and that moment I was kind of hooked. I don't know what it was. She told me, hey, put it in Photoshop. Maybe you can mess around with it. And that kind of turned into a thing where I was like, well, that was fun. I got to kind of take out like an old gross looking beam or something like that. And it kind of just started right then and there. And next thing I know, I was YouTube grinding, looking up people, looking up different things I had no idea. I knew nothing about it prior to 2017. I'd never even touched a camera. I was that guy that I hate to admit, but I was like, man, who's that person taking a picture? They must think they're Peter Parker, you know what I mean? And here I am now, I love to do it. And I wish I would have got on it a lot earlier. And I think that's kind of what drew me to it, was just that as a kid, I thought I could draw. Both my dad and my brother could draw pretty good. But I could not, but I could visually see it, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think once I took that, I was like, oh, that's a little bit easier than drawing, and I can still manipulate things and light and everything. Obviously that came a little bit later. But that was kind of the start of it. And that's what kind of really pushed me to just keep going. So.
Well, that's incredible, especially being self-taught. What was the learning process like for you? Do you have any key moments or challenges that shaped your style as an artist?
Well, for me, the best way that I learned was just YouTube. I was looking, one day I had an idea of maybe trying to do like a time lapse, and I heard you could do photos with time lapse. I was asking people, and I found this guy online, and I just kind of stuck with him. Like it happened to be at the time where he was talking about like basics of photography and simple things. And the way he explained it was just the way my brain works. It wasn't about so much the technical stuff of it, but it was just about enjoying the moment that you're doing it, and that you're going to mess up but the thing is, he would say, you're also not messing up, you're doing it the way you want to do it. And that's what you like. And it was just something about the way that he taught it, even though it's just on YouTube, it stuck with me. And I've just slowly carried that into like, if I'm telling somebody something or teaching, I guess, whatever, how I understand it and how I relay it. So it's been a good little journey on that. So, and I'm still growing every day. You know, I don't ever feel like I'll ever be completely comfortable with where I'm at, because I'm just not that person.
Right.
I like to gradually change with the art, and I feel like once I get complacent, I'm not where I want to be. I want to always be kind of challenging myself and reaching past what I know I can do. So.
Your work is very much about challenging the perception of Indigenous representation. What do you hope to convey through your photography and films, and why is it so important for you to tell your stories visually?
Well, you know, as a kid, you know, I kind of grew up, you know, in like a small area, and then I moved to a little bit bigger of area. But in both areas, you know, the small town, it was, you know, oh, you're just an Indian kid, you know, this and that. And then once I got to the bigger town I lived in Arkansas, in Fayetteville, it was like, oh, you guys are still here. Like, we thought, you know, a lot of people always think, you know, I'm Hispanic and stuff like that. And it's like, no, you know, we're still roaming. Like, I'm literally like, where I went to high school, the Trail of Tears line was right in front of my high school, and people didn't understand like that moment. Like, you know, somebody in my family had to walk right there in order for me to even be where I am at right now. You know, and of course those kids didn't really understand that, you know, which I get, you know. But I think even though then I wasn't doing any kind of art or whatever, I just felt like I needed to be seen and heard, you know what I mean? And a lot of that became with sports and everything like that, you know, and I knew we needed to be more than just what people didn't know and how they perceive us, and even how I kind of perceive myself, because there was times where I would just kind of be quiet. It's like, I don't want to even get into this conversation because, you know, now I got to explain, you know, I'm not this, or we're not what's on TV, you know, whatever. And once I kind of got into this field and I realized portraits were kind of my thing, just something about like really interacting with people and more or less getting to know them, and whether you know their story or not in the photo, I got to meet them and understand who they are and experience them, and be more than just, it was more than just a photo, you know what I mean? At least from my experience, because, you know, I got to know them personally, and I feel like when I take photos of them, you know, I'm not only representing them, but also myself, and like highlighting things, and that, you know, we're just normal people, and, you know, we still do our cultural grind. And it was just important to me to have that, you know, and I feel like every person has some sort of story, even if it's not that big of a story in their eyes, you know, I want to be able to bring that out and make them feel the most important at that moment. You know what I mean? And I feel like, I just feel like when I do them, I can do that, you know what I mean? And I feel like they're very happy with what they get. And yeah, so.
Well, I love that. Your work really does bring forth the strength, resilience, and beauty of your community in such a powerful way. Can you share a project that has been particularly meaningful to you, and why?
Okay. Well, it really wasn't even so much a project that I was reached out to. It would have been back in probably 2018. I was very, very early on. My wife is part of a more or less kind of like the MMIW scene, and the missing and murdered Indigenous women scene, you know, helping and doing everything she can with, you know, her family and everything like that. And it was just a photo. I was holding a meat pie in my hand, and I was shooting on a Canon Rebel with a 50 mil. Just more or less, I went to the event in Oklahoma City, and it was just a rally for, you know, bring more awareness. And she just kind of looked back at me. She had a handprint on her face, you know, the redhead handprint. And she looked back at me, and I just kind of put my feet up, and I was like, wait right there. And I had to like move my sandwich or my meat pie. And I just turned it vertical, and it was just like a perfect line. The crowd was all looking one way, and she was looking back at me. And I was like, and all the light around her was kind of darker, but the little bit of sun was hitting her. And I snapped it, and I turned it black and white, and did the cliche, you know, paint the color back black and white. But it just, I don't know, something about it really hit, you know, and I feel like that was probably one of the moments. And, you know, and like I said, it wasn't for anything. It was just something that I got at that moment, and it felt very meaningful. And a lot of people don't know, if you zoom in really close to it, she's actually holding my daughter. But she was so much in the shadow, you can't even see her, you know. It's kind of a happy accident that was meant to happen. It's kind of like what I like to call it. But that would be one of the very proudest things, not only because it's a meaningful topic and subject, but it also is my wife. And she's probably been like one of the biggest supporters since I've been doing this, and let me practice on her a lot. You know what I mean when it comes to photos. So, yeah, so I couldn't really be doing this probably without her.
She's become your muse.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
It sounds like an incredible moment, and it's clear from what you've described that in that moment that you've put so much of yourself into that work. What inspires you on a daily basis, and how do you stay connected to your creative vision?
Um, I would say what inspires me the most probably, is for sure my family, wife, my kids especially, and even my parents, my grandparents, like we've grown up in such a small community, in Westville in Oklahoma, but usually a little bit right outside of it, and uh I just felt like that this is a sense of them living through me, like I feel like a lot of this stuff that I get or a little bit of recognition, like I don't really like to say that. I don't feel like that's not my goal is to get any of that, I just do this because I love to do it. But I feel like I don't know. I feel like it helps them be seen. You know what I mean? People see my family in a more brighter light. You know what I mean? And uh, so I just feel like a lot of them really push me, even though they don't
Mm.
physically, not physically, but they don't realize that they do it. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I do a lot of that with them in mind, and that's kind of what really drives me. And also, I'm a very competitive person, and I compete with myself a lot, and I not so much other photographers, but I just, like I said, I like to challenge myself and push boundaries and push buttons. And of course, I want my kids to see that, that, you don't have to go a directional or a certain route to get to where you want to do something you love. Nobody in my family that I know of has ever been in any kind of field that I'm in now, so I feel very fortunate to be maybe one of those people that can kind of start that trend. Like, hey, you don't have to go and work at the local place, or you can get out. And a lot of that started with my parents, trying to like, hey, do something, and if they don't work out, we're always here. So
Right.
that's kind of the vibe that I go through with that. So I would say a lot of my family is probably my biggest inspiration.
Do you have a particular moment or experience where you felt your art had a real impact on someone?
um it's hard to say because I feel like there has been moments where it has, and but it's kind of been one of those things where it wasn't particularly said. You know what I mean? Like I can feel a lot of times people, I'll send just digital or the text of the photo, oh, excuse me, on my phone, just to kind of give
Mm.
them like a little sneak peek. And sometimes some of the stuff they say is very touching, you know what I mean? But I'm always sure to let them know that, I really appreciate them trusting me with this kind of moment, and it's all very nice, it's like I said, it's not really just one thing. It's a lot of the, different things. Like the other day I did a shoot. It was this older man and this lady who they have, I think, 7 or 8 kids. They're all grown up, and the parents are a lot older, and the dad was very, very happy the fact that he could get all of them for his parents. And it was just a very family photo, very clean, just whatever. But it wasn't nothing crazy, but they really appreciated it, and it kind of reminded me of like why I do this sometimes. That it's not about the money, not about that, but to capture those kind of moments that will live forever. Even
Mhm.
past the people that are here. That will even go to probably their grandkids. You know what I mean? So I always feel very happy to be a part of that thing in the future that'll be even past my time.
It's also such another powerful moment. It really highlights the impact of representation
All right.
through generations.
Mm.
As a filmmaker, how do you approach storytelling in film compared to photography?
Well,
Do you
so
find
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah. Do you find that the one medium is more challenging or rewarding than the other?
So filmmaking has been very new to me. I've been going at it for about 2 years now. My job, I work for Cherokee Film here in Tulsa. Our office is downtown, so I get to work on OCO TV. documentary work, and one of the things I was told when I first came on is, sometimes a lot of photographers end up being cinematographers, just now you just have moving people. And it took a little bit more of it. It's just the technical aspect for me, and I'm not a brag or anything like that, but I like a lot of my frames that I get. And, just because it feels like they are photos, obviously, I mean, they are, but it is a very different field. A lot of it, I'm fine with roaming around with a camera and doing whatever, but when I'm filming, it feels different. It's something about, obviously I'm holding a bigger rig, but it was a challenging moment at first, and I'm slowly getting more comfortable and confident in it, and hopefully eventually we'll be able to start shooting like a short that I want to work on. But my problem for me is writing. I am a horrible writer because I've always been a hey, we'll get there and see what happens, and we'll make it, we'll make it work. So it's very hard for me to sit down and put down ideas because ideas usually just come to me at that moment. So I'm still working on that, and luckily I'm in a position that helps me work on those skills, and I get to film a lot throughout the year, so I'm always practicing. So
a lot of ad lib.
yeah, a lot of it, and I think that's kind of how my life has always been. I've, like I said, I've always kind of took challenges as they come, and I've always just I always enjoy that,
Right.
it's how I thrive, and that could be just because coming from being a dad, I don't know, it could be life experiences prior to, I was the oldest kid of everybody, even, cousins, so being that protector, I guess, I
Right.
just, be like, hey, we're gonna go out here, all 8 of us, let's go, trying to kind of take the lead, even though I'm a very quiet person, but I just feel like it's my lead by example type feel, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but I don't know if that really answered it, but I was trying to kind of work it in there somehow, so.
Well, me and Joe have a show we can pitch you for OCO TV.
Okay, perfect.
Well, you've worked on both personal projects and larger productions. Do you approach each project differently, or is there a common thread in how you approach your work, whether it's film or a photo series?
Hmm. Well, usually it's about the same for me. It
Mhm.
really, luckily with the job I do now, we have producers and everything, so they get to carry a lot of the strategical load, I guess, if that makes sense.
Right.
Reaching out to talent, everything like that. And I'm very fortunate enough, I get to do the really really fun stuff, and filming it and working in collaboration with them, and a lot of times when it's just me solo riding and doing my own thing, I'm having those same conversations, but with myself, and
Right.
so sometimes I have to go producer mode, sometimes I have to go shooter mode, and but I would say it's very similar to me, depending, on where it is and what it is, and also certain
Mhm.
things that I feel like I thrive better in. I can go and film a powwow and do portraits of people in regalia and everything, but then I'll get somewhere and it's just, portraits, corporate headshots that I'm like, man, I just really struggle with these. You know what I mean? So it just really depends on the mood of or the vibe of what it is and the how they want it, how they have it pitched. You know what I mean? And a lot of times I get
Exactly. Yeah.
a little bit of creative flair on it. So
Well, yeah, your imagery is powerful and it's dynamic. When you're behind the camera, what elements do you focus on when you create a visually compelling image? Is it
just for
competition?
for filming or photos or just both?
Both. Both. What drives you in the moment? Is it
Okay.
composition or lighting?
So I'm a big fan, like lighting, yes, but for me, it's just composition. To me, composition is, as simple as just the horizon. Like I'm a big guy, a big guy. I'm a big person on not putting a horizon through a head. You know what I mean? To me,
Mm.
like putting it right below the neck, right around the shoulder line, and I shoot a lot of low and up. That's just I like that very heroish Superman, vibe, and I feel like that plays a lot into what I do now, and to me it starts with the composition, and then I play with light a little bit later. I do a lot of natural light, but I also do a lot of strobe light as well, with I use Ellen Chrome on the side, you know what I mean, for my lights, and I usually use the sun as my backlight, and I already have kind of a darker tone to my things, and of course Lightroom lets me brush in light a little bit, and I found
Right.
a good rhythm of what I like to do, and but I would say composition is probably my first thing, because I feel like if it's easily unbalanced, or that usually tells the story. If you want it a little eerie, put them one side of the frame. If you want it very heroic, put them here, and I feel like that's where it kind of starts. You know what I mean? So that's what I would say.
Well, being self taught, how did you develop your eye for composition? And were there any specific techniques or influences that helped shape your approach to creating dynamic shots?
Um, I think what kind of developed it would, I mean, it sounds weird to say, but when I was a kid, my dad used to have a bunch of comic books,
Mm,
and I remember looking at those, and I remember Wolverine being on the front of one, and it's just like a little portrait of him. He kind of had like his claws up, and just something about seeing those kind of frames like that and constantly seeing them, I think just burnt into my brain. You know what I mean? And then even like when I would
right.
draw, I would try to draw that kind of way. Like I feel like I naturally see the rule of thirds rule, like naturally. I don't know why, I just do. And it could be from watching films a lot as a kid, and just it's really hard to explain. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just the way that I see it. You know what I mean? And of course, like I said, when I go back to the YouTube, the guy who I was watching, I kind of wanted to implement his style, not so much his look, but his style of it. And a
Mm,
lot of the stuff he said was kind of stuff that I already initially clicked with, and I liked a lot. That low and up. He one of the first videos I watched, he showed good examples of like shooting down at a person. He was like, yeah, just see how it kind of like makes them not feel as strong. It makes them feel
right.
whatever. And it was a person getting married. You know what I mean? Which is probably completely fine. The photo looked fine, everything. But he was like, I would have went under. He did it another way, and it just looked so much better, and that just worked
Right.
with my mind. And I more or less just kind of followed that and stuck with that. And the color and the lighting kind of developed into its own thing a little bit later. I was actually looking at really old photos today from 2018 when I started, and it has changed. The composition is the same, but the lighting has changed tremendously. So, but yeah.
Hmm. Your work is rooted in storytelling, and every image seems to have a narrative behind it. How do you approach capturing that story in a single frame? And do you plan it out, or is it more about letting the moment unfold naturally?
It is more of letting it probably happen at that moment. I like I said, I'm not there's some things I'll set up, that I'll do that I have planned in my mind, but a lot of times I'll get that photo and three others will come from it. You know what I mean? That's happening at that moment. Just because, I've never wanted to force anything. You know what I mean? Because I felt like if I'm forcing it, the person will know I'm forcing it. And then it also makes me kind of look like I don't know what I'm doing. Like if I'm rushing or doing whatever. I always have a good idea. And like I said, I like to talk to the people, 30 minutes prior before even shooting, just so they know that I'm invested in them and their time. And but yeah, a lot of it is really just kind of at the moment, and uh I try to make them as comfortable as I can. I'll put one light and I move around the person. It's not me moving them, it's me moving around them. And I find a lot of really unique frames. And obviously I know, software is crazy. I know like, hey, if this light's in it, I can take it out as long as I get a good frame and I have room to Photoshop something out, I can take it out, so. And a lot
Right.
of times I feel like that might be what kind of holds things back, from certain photos, because, it's like, well, this looks cool, but how do I get this light out? How do I manipulate this and that, and I just found a way to do it, and it's what I enjoy. So,
So I came across you on social media, and your use of light is really striking in your photography. I'm like, oh well, we got to have him on the show.
and
Can you talk about how you work with light to enhance the mood and narrative of a shot as you kind of got into? I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
okay. Well, for me, I do the very, 45-degree, little strobe right there on the side. And I'm a very,
Mm,
like I said, what helps me is my tones. Like I feel like I never like super overexposed. I am that guy
mm,
who will crush any dark area of the photo, just because I feel like, cameras these days, I can brighten it up a little bit later. I can push ISO. I can even, like I said, the software, I know I can crank it a little bit. And naturally understanding stops and exposure and everything helps me a lot as well. But I don't know. It's kind of like filming, I like to put the light where the source is probably coming from, so the side of the sun. I love shooting into the broadside with the darker shadow. That's just my style, and I feel like it adds layers to the person. It adds layers to it has character, and it's not just fully lit. And I don't know, the sunset, golden hour vibe, it just, those three things mixed together, I feel like just work really well for what I do. But what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry, I was trying to remember what you said there at the end. I'm trying
Good
not to just
question.
rant either. I'm sorry if I start ranting. I'll say the same thing 5 different ways, so I'm just trying to stay on track for you guys.
No worries. I mean, how do you use light to enhance the mood and narrative of a shot?
Okay. Yeah. Well, like I said, I just kind of play into the sun, of course, and I feel like I just feel like the toneness of it. I feel like my photos have a little bit of life experience in them, and I feel like that might be why people connect with them. I don't know how. I don't.
Right.
It works for me. That's how I see things. I feel like that soft tone with the little, and I'm not a big contrast guy. A lot of people, it looks like there's a lot in my photo, and I guess technically there is, but I leave the contrast alone and I just turn down the color black. You know what I mean? And I'm not giving like secrets away or anything like that. It's just, everybody does their own thing, but I just feel like the deeper tones of it kind of hit more than just the outside perspective. You know what I mean? I feel
Right.
like it feels like it tells its own story, in a way that sometimes I'm not even meaning to, or I'm not even sure, but I just feel like that moment, it makes that person feel very important, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I know that photo will live past, even me, and just making sure I have really good light on it and playing into what's there with the elements, you know what I mean? And I just feel like it tells its own story.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Color plays such an important role in visual storytelling, and your use of color is clearly very intentional. How do you decide on your color palette for each shot, and how do you think it affects the viewer's experience?
Well, I think for me, it would be, I've always liked that warmer tone, you know, I don't know what it is. I just, it could be films, you know what I mean? I'm not sure. One of the very first movies I ever remember watching as a kid with my dad, was Star Wars, the original. And maybe it was the Tatooine vibe, that warmer, deserty tone, the twin suns, whatever. And I'm not saying that's what it is, but it just had to be something along the line that's kind of pushed me through that color, uh, and maybe it could be, just fighting two different color temps. You know what I mean? Maybe the glow of the sun for the time I like to shoot doesn't really work well with a cooler tone. So, um, but I would say that I just, yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question for me because it's just what I like, you know. And I kind of always stood by that. I tried not to. I've got inspiration from people, but I never wanted to fully copy somebody, if that makes sense. I always knew I would find my way and I could work around it. So, yeah, I would say I just like that warmer tone, and I think it reaches people a way, because I think it feels like it gives off that little kid vibe in the evening, hanging out with your parents or your grandparents, and like everybody can connect to that time of the day. You know what I mean? And in
Right.
some way, even if it is a bad experience, but I feel like that will reach somebody in some way. And I think maybe that's why the tones, especially that time, that kind of light makes sense to me. Because when I think about it, I see me with my parents, with my grandparents in Summers, Arkansas, sitting on a porch, just around pine trees, and just, and loving that time, as a kid. So, and maybe that's probably why I feel like it resonates with people.
In your photography, there's a sense of motion or energy that keeps the viewer engaged. How do you capture that sense of movement, and what do you think it adds to the overall story that you're trying to convey?
I actually feel like what the sense of movement comes from their eyes. I feel like you kind of get you feel like they have something to say, and you're not sure what it is, but you know it's something powerful. You know it's something strong. And I feel like the way I compose and everything, I feel like it gives the person a more sense of confidence, not only in the photo, but I feel like even when they see themselves in the photo, I feel like,
Hmm.
they feel very proud with what they're already doing, mixed with a little bit of what I'm doing to help them, and I feel like it's all in their eyes, and because I mean technically I guess they're not moving, but it's like
Right.
what about it, captivates that grabs people, and even like saying that, it kind of gives me chills because I at times I don't even know really where I'm going with it. I just know
Hmm.
at that moment that I'm like, I'm doing something that's very beautiful and strong, and and I'm just excited about it, and and I feel like I said, the narrative of it is just it's really their story, and I'm just the person with the pen that's able to write it down, because
Right.
and like it goes back to me not wanting to. I don't want the whole. I don't want to be recognized for this or that, and this whatever. I was happy that I could take that for them and highlight them, and put them up there where I feel like they deserve. They're not only representing their culture, but also their family and who they are as a person, and I feel like that's just an important thing that needs to be passed on. And obviously, if people see them doing it, their kids see them doing it, they're probably going to do it, So
Right.
I feel like that's
True.
a really important thing.
Hmm. In addition to photographing people, you've also captured stunning landscapes. When you're shooting a landscape, how do you approach it differently than photographing people? And
Oh,
what,
okay. uh, so I wouldn't really consider myself a very good landscape photographer. I actually just had this conversation with somebody. I showed them a phone photo I took of a landscape that I will admit that I think is actually pretty good for me. But I don't know. I think it goes back to composition. Like, do I want that 50-50 split? You know what I mean? Do I
Right.
want to show more of the sky and put the stuff down at the bottom, the trees or whatever? I think it just really depends on where I'm at. But I would honestly, like I said, approach it about the same. Like, I know there's not anybody there, but there's still a point to where your eye is going to go, and I want to. It sounds weird to say can control that, but that's where I want you to look, and then let
Hmm.
you, peel the pages back to see the whole thing, and I feel
Right.
like I even in landscapes I feel like I can do that. So, and even when they're black and white, I love black and white photos, and I would love to probably only shoot black and white, but I sometimes the color is just the way to go on landscapes.
True. Well, as a photographer and filmmaker, how do you keep your creative energy flowing? I mean, you're doing this and working it full time, and life's things that happen every day. Are there any
Right.
specific practices or routines that you follow to stay inspired and keep pushing your work forward?
Honestly, it's probably just people in general. Like I said, I work around a bunch of creative people,
Hmm.
and even like I said, when I'm at home, I have a daughter who's very interested in like what I'm doing now, and that also kind of pushes me to be even more creative. And I don't think there's ever a time that I can remember since I've been doing this for I haven't had any kind of like creativity come to me, because I feel
Right.
like even bad ideas or ideas I think that are crazy, I feel like they're still just ideas that keep my mind going, uh, and it is tough. It is tough with all the with job and everything, and raising a family and still being there for them. And I travel a little bit for work, but everywhere I go, it sounds crazy and cliche, but everywhere I go, I literally see frames everywhere I go. I'm like, man, that would be a cool photo, or that the way I can see through that fence and that person sitting on a bench. Like that's how I see
Mm.
the world. I'm at home. I see my daughter sitting at our kitchen table with a little bit of light coming through the window, and I'm like, if I turn down that exposure, lift her a little bit, like that would be a good picture, like that's just how I see the world in that creative mindset. Cause I think as a kid, that's where I had to go a lot, if I was bored, my dad, would be like, there's no such thing as being bored, use your imagination, go
Right.
find you something to do. And if not, I got trash you can pick up outside. So it was like, and it was like, all right, well, we had to stay out of the way because my mom's doing cleaning, or something like that. So it was like we had to
Mhm.
do a lot of our own. Obviously, they hung out with us, but like as a kid, people are busy. Like you gotta find your
Mhm.
way, and I feel like that's always helped my imagination and being creative. But I would say that I don't think there's ever been a time where I felt like I've stalled out. Have I ever felt burnt out? I think
Right.
so, but that's just from all the work, and not so much about being burnt out and done with what I was doing, So
Hmm. Looking at your work, there's a deep connection to your Cherokee and Muskogee Creek heritage. How do you incorporate those cultural elements into your craft, and how important is it for you to keep that connection alive in your visual storytelling?
okay. Well, for me, like I said, as a kid, we grew up very, like, I like to call it like country ending. Like we lived out in the woods, and it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I moved to Fayetteville, which I consider a big city. You know what I mean? Just a bigger city in Arkansas. Even when I first moved to Arkansas, we lived, in a small community. But I just, I don't know. It feels very, man, I'm not gonna lie, I lost my train of thought there. What what did you ask me again? I am sorry. I started thinking about all that, and it threw me off for a second. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, I was asking about how do you incorporate cultural elements into
Oh,
your
that's right.
crafts?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Um, so, like I said, growing up like that, we weren't really, I mean, comic books and maybe cartoons on Saturday, really is like what kind of kept me the most art that I've ever kind of been around. So I didn't really know that much about, I guess Cherokee art, and stuff
Mm.
like that in general. Uh, but it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I kind of, I was in high school, I guess, I started seeing, baskets and stuff like that and that people were doing, and kind of not really knowing the people, because I guess technically I would have kind of grown up outside of the community, if that makes sense, being in Arkansas. But I knew there was art, and it probably wasn't until I truly met my wife and everything, because my wife is Osage. So a lot of the people that I end up photographing, are some are Cherokee, but they're also Osage as well. So a lot of times they're in, their straight dance clothes, everything like that. But it wasn't until, I met my wife, and I started doing these photos, that I started having a little bit more appreciation for, just native art in general. Like looking at somebody's, broadcloth and looking at their ribbon work, I was like, man, somebody's hands have been doing that. Like that is art that people just pass by and not think anything about, something
True.
beaded, and I feel like it, as I've gotten older, and, and have been around more of, especially from another tribe, uh, to really appreciate not only mine, but others as well. So yeah. And
Very
like I said,
true.
and it's kind of really helps me understand, that, and more or less teach that we're not all the same. We all have something a little
Mm.
different about us. So
Well, you've been a strong advocate for Indigenous representation in media. What do you think still needs to change in the industry? And how do you see your work contributing to that change?
well, I feel like a lot of it. I feel like some of it is getting a little better.
Hmm.
I feel like with, the shows and everything that's out, even what I do for work, we are just telling, Cherokee stories, but it's still, in some people's eyes, they're still just Indians. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but I feel like uh, that right now we're on a good route that I think it is better. But I just feel like, people are still very, what do you call that? Not hard headed. What is that word? It's like where they still don't realize what they're doing might be offensive or might be a little cheesy. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're into the pan Indian, vibe. We're not, we're not all headdresses. We're not all this or that. And I feel like it's hard for people to get out of that. And I
Hmm.
feel I don't know. how to really change that other than for us to control our perception by doing things like, like my photos or like the show, and more or less being like, without these on or without that, we are still just people, but we're people with our own identities, and that, because it seems like you can wear this or you can wear that or you can say this, you can say that, it doesn't mean that it's okay, or
Right.
and I feel like the right representation thing, like I said, with like what I'm doing kind of helps with that, because, and
Mhm.
obviously I have a lot of people in regalia and everything, but I'm trying to show that they're not just clothes they're putting on that you can go and touch or you can go and just buy, or it's not a cool thing like like a character on a TV show, that they have seen forever. This is an actual real person who lives through their culture.
Hmm. As someone who's completely self-taught and has built such an incredible career, what advice would you give to an aspiring photographer or filmmakers, especially from Indigenous communities that want to break into the industry?
I would say that I would say to not be afraid to fail. Don't be
Mm.
afraid to, and these are things I wish I would have told myself at first, but like I said, I'm a very competitive person, so I was like, I'm not losing, I'm gonna learn how to do this somehow. And of course a little bit of I guess natural ability as well, but I feel like you only know if you try. So
Right.
I feel like I would just say, don't be afraid to fail, or don't be afraid to try. Don't, if you have a story to tell, even if it's not in photos, get it out there somehow. And I just was lucky to find my way doing this. But I would say to try it and get out there. If you have a phone, you have a camera. Like don't get caught up in gear this, gear that, just get in and tell what you want to tell, show what you want to show, and your time will come. Like, you're only going to get better. There's no way you can get worse unless you're doing it on purpose. Just keep grinding, and and I always tell people this all the time. If there's a kid out there that wants to go shoot like on a weekend or something, I will meet you. That I literally love just walking and taking photos somewhere, downtown, wherever, I'm always open to that, to teach and not even teach, but to show and be like, hey, this is how I'm doing it. I want you to do it how you want to do it. And I'll give you a tip if I think you need one, or suggestions, but I will never try to, tell you how I think it should be done. I just want
Right.
you to try. So,
There's no wrong or right way, and there's no reason why I can't be the absolute answer in doing
right,
what you feel comes from your passion.
right.
And I mean, Cody, this has been an amazing conversation. Your passion, obviously, for storytelling and attention to the craft of photography and filmmaking are truly inspiring. Thank you for sharing your process and your insights with us today.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Cody, your work is not only beautiful, but it's impactful. And it's clear that you put so much thought into every shot that you take. We can't wait for what you're going to do next. And I know our listeners will be following your journey as well.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Yeah, I'm excited as well. I got a lot of things in my mind that I want to do, and I got it kind of not really coming up, but I have just a lot of things that got my mind really excited and me excited that I can't wait to share with everybody, and hopefully it just continues to reach the people that need it, and hopefully it reaches, eyes that really get inspired from it, because for me, that's what I really want, is to just inspire people to keep going on. So
Perfect. Fantastic. And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us today on Beyond the Art. Be sure to check out Cody's incredible photography and films and keep supporting Indigenous voices in art and media. Until next time, keep creating and keep telling your stories.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through Indigenous art and creativity. Stay inspired and keep exploring with us on Beyond the Art.
Remember to subscribe and follow us for more exclusive interviews, insightful discussions, and stories that ignite your artistic imagination.
Until next time, continue to unlock your limitless potential with Beyond the Art. Thank you for listening.